Welcome to The Explainer. Look, if you're studying for your MLO exam, you already know the Equal Credit Opportunity Act is a really big deal. So let's cut right to the chase. We are going to focus on the exact regulations, rules, and timelines that you are almost guaranteed to see on your test.
So here's our game plan. We're going to follow the journey of a loan application, from start to finish. We'll start with the basics of what ECOA even is, then get into the protected classes, the rules for the application itself, and those super important deadlines you have to meet. Thinking about it this way really helps you organize it in your head for exam day. Okay, first things first. Before we can get into all the nitty-gritty rules, we've got to understand the big idea behind ECOA and why it's considered the absolute foundation of fair lending. When you boil it all down, this huge piece of legislation is all about one simple but incredibly powerful idea, an idea that is the bedrock of ethical lending.
And that idea is the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. Now here is your first huge exam tip. ECOA is put into practice by Regulation B. For the test, you've got to know that ECOA and Regulation B are basically two names for the same thing. The whole point is to make sure credit decisions are based on one thing and one thing only, an applicant's finances, not their personal characteristics. So if ECOA is all about stopping discrimination, who exactly does it protect? Well, the law is super specific about this, and for your exam, you absolutely have to know this list by heart.
Okay, this slide right here, this is pure gold for your exam. Seriously, you might want to pause and make some flashcards. You cannot, under any circumstances, discriminate based on these factors, period. Now, most of them are pretty straightforward, right? But pay close attention to the last two, getting public assistance and using your rights under consumer protection laws. Those two are classic, tricky test questions. Let's talk about the age rule for a second, because it trips a lot of people up. ECOA says you can't discriminate based on age, but it's not trying to defy common sense. You absolutely can, and you must, make sure an applicant has the legal capacity to sign a contract, which really just means they're not a minor. The rule is there to protect older applicants, not to force you to give a mortgage to a 15-year-old. All right, so knowing who is protected is half the battle. But how does that actually change the questions you can ask when you're taking an application? Well, ECOA gets really, really specific about what's okay and what is way out of bounds. Just think of this slide as your compliance cheat sheet. Over on the left, you've got the absolute no-go questions, like anything about family planning. But the right side, the permitted stuff, that's where it gets nuanced, and that's what you'll see on the test. See, you can't ask about alimony or child support, but, and this is the key, if an applicant wants to use that income to help them qualify, then you are absolutely allowed to ask for the details and verify it. Now, I know what you're thinking. This seems like a total contradiction, but there is one very specific time when you are actually required to ask for someone's demographic info, and it has nothing to do with the loan decision itself. It's all about monitoring compliance with federal laws. Right, this whole process falls under the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act, or HMDA, and it has a very specific script you have to follow. You must ask for their info for monitoring, but in the same breath, you have to tell them it's optional, explain what you'll do if they say no, and make it crystal clear that their answer has zero, and I mean zero, impact on whether they get the loan. Okay, so the application is complete, it's sitting on your desk, now what? Well, the clock is officially ticking. ECOA has very strict deadlines for letting the applicant know what's going on. This slide right here is exam royalty. You need to burn the 30-30-90 rule into your brain. You've got 30 days to give an applicant a decision on a completed application. You also have 30 days to let them know if their application is incomplete. Now, the 90-day rule kicks in after you've made a counteroffer that the applicant doesn't take. You then have 90 days from that counteroffer to send out the official adverse action notice. And hey, when you do have to deny a loan, you can't just send an email that says, sorry, no. The adverse action notice has to have all these specific parts. And here's a key detail for your exam. You have to either list the specific reasons for the denial right there on the notice, or you have to tell them they have a right to request those reasons. It's one or the other. All right, let's switch gears to another huge topic that you'll definitely see on the exam, the eco-valuations rule. This is all about the applicant's right to get a copy of their appraisals. When it comes to the valuations rule, the magic number is 3, and it shows up twice. First, as soon as you have an application, you have 3 business days to notify the borrower that they have a right to receive a copy of the appraisal. This is just the notification. Then, once the appraisal is actually done, you have to provide them with a copy. You need to do it promptly, but no later than 3 business days before closing. So it's 3 days to notify them of their right, and then at least 3 business days before closing to actually provide the document.
Now, here's a really important distinction for the test. The borrower can waive the timing of when they get the copy. So if they're in a rush to close, they can agree to get the appraisal at the closing table. But, and this is crucial, they can never, ever waive their fundamental right to receive the copy itself. They always get it, they can just change when they get it. Phew, we have covered a lot of ground. So let's boil it all down into one final checklist, a sort of high-level review you can use right before you walk into that testing center. And there you have it. This is your ECOA exam checklist. If you can confidently explain every single one of these 6 points, knowing that ECOA is Reg B, having that list of protected classes memorized, the rules of what you can ask, the 30-30-90 deadlines, what goes in an adverse action notice, and the rule of threes for appraisals, I promise you, you are going to be in fantastic shape for any ECOA question the exam throws at you. So that's our deep dive into what you need to know about ECOA for the test. But as you finish studying, just remember, these rules, they're so much more than just answers on an exam. They're the ethical foundation of our entire industry. Mastering them isn't just about passing a test. It's about building a career that truly champions fairness for every single client you work with. Good luck.